Okay, so today's workshop is not being introduced by Jason because he blew his machine up. I am William, also known as Pick and Mix Mods, and today's workshop is on reading error logs. So we shall get going. So what is an error log? You get a lot of people in the forums go, "Oh, I got an error," and they send you a picture of this little pop-up object error box and they go, "And the error log said this." That is not an error log. The error log is the text file that it references. So in that at the bottom we can see it says it's C users, documents, EA games, blah de blah de blah, object error N0001_T17. And if you look at that text file, it contains a lot of lines of gobbledygook, and we are going to be looking at the gobbledygook. So the pop-up dialog is not the error log. The thing it refers to is the error log. So having got that out of the way, how do we enable error logging? Well, by default, error logging is not enabled. Most of us will probably play our games with the bullprops testing cheats enabled true set in the startup file, and that's how you get those error logs, those error pop-ups generating. If you don't have that testing cheat enabled, so you don't have error log enabled, when an error occurs, sims will jump. They usually rotate round to a different position, or if they're in bed, they suddenly jump up and stand by the side of the bed. And what the game is doing there is that it's just resetting whatever created the error, which is usually a sim, to a known good state. So a position it can start running the simulation from again. With error logging enabled though, what you get is the error pop-up is shown and an error log is created, and then you have an option of doing three things, as we saw on the previous slide, which is either cancel, reset, or delete. If you hit cancel, almost always the error log set pops up again. If you hit reset, it will reset the sim to the known good state, and you can then usually continue playing from there. If you hit delete, it will delete the object that caused the error. Now, if that was a sim, you get the alarming thing where the sim gets deleted from the log, and you have to then go and respawn them. If a object created the error, then the object will just be deleted from the log. So the one you almost always want is reset. So how can we generate an error log? Well, three ways of generating it really. When something goes wrong and you get the pop-up that comes. The other way is that you can, with testing cheats enabled on, you can shift click any object which brings up the debug menu, and one of the debug options is always force error. And if you click that, it will cause the object to throw an error and you'll get an error log. These can be quite useful for determining what is on a lot, what is in an inventory, things like that, without looking through. The other way to generate an error log is from within a bhav via code. And the easiest way to do that is to insert what's called a no-op instruction and have both of its exits set to error. Now, I could have set the previous line, the one that's pointing to the no-op, line 1, where it hooks to true. I could have had that throw an error, and then I would have got the error at line 1. The disadvantage to doing that is you don't really know where that exit point was meant to be going. So after you've spent 5 or 10 minutes debugging and you go to remove where it's throwing the error, you go, now was that meant to go to line 3 or line 4? At least if you go via the no-op, you can use the false exit to remind yourself or stick other information in there as an aid memoir. But I prefer inserting no-ops into the code and forcing errors out of there. And a no-op does exactly what it says. It's no operation. It's just a global bhav that actually does nothing. But it just gives you a marker in the code where you can force these exits from. So with our error log complete, generated, how do we read it? Well, they are usually very, very long. The one I've got as an example that we're going to look at in a minute is several thousand lines long. Getting the correct information out of it is tricky, and there are many sections. And what we're going to do is we're just going to briefly rip through the slides, which are what the sections are, and then we're actually going to look at a real log. So an error log has a header. It contains some useful information to Maxis, its build, useful information to us, the object ID of what generated an error, it's usually a sim, the name of what threw the error, stack size, frames, the actual error, which is geek speak, and we will decode some of those later, how many iterations since have been executed, and as it's saying here on the main part, we're usually only interested in the object ID, name, and error. You then get a stack frame, which is all of the bhalves that were called in reverse order. So the last one that's called is at the top of the stack, and the first one that's called is at the bottom of the stack, and we can work our way through those. Bits that we can look at. So again, I'm going to look at a real one in a minute. Stack frames, we can find out parameters and locals from them. Reference to a document there that you can look at, which gives you a lot more information about the contents of or what parameters and locals are. It gives us lots of information about what was currently in the globals, other information. Then it gives you a whole load of information about the my object, which is usually the sim, and that's a lot of data. It then gives you the inventory contents, a global inventory, which is not global, it's actually for the hood. The lot inventory is for the house, the family inventory is for the family, and the personal inventory is for the sim, so you can find out what the sim has in their backpack. You can look at tokens, you can look at memories and things. And then it does it all again for the current stack object, which is usually the thing the sim is interacting with. You then get what's called the lot object dump, which is every single object on the lot, and you get what the current cheats are set to. But what we're going to do, if I can find the thing I'm looking for, so we're actually going to look at an error log. Where are you? So this is an error log that was generated from an object called accessory clipboard of tasks. That was the thing that the sim, Dina, was interacting with when it threw an error, which is stack number out of range. We'll look at these in a bit more in a minute. But as you can see, this thing goes on for absolutely hundreds of lines. And we get down to the bottom and we're actually at line 2664. So finding anything in there can involve a lot of scrolling and a lot of searching and a lot of, oh, what does this number mean, and various other things. Now what I've done is I've taken this object error file and I've split it down into the sections that the previous slides were on, and I've just inserted these things that say header, stack frame. So we'll go through them in the order that the slides were. So the header is giving us some build. This is the version of the game that you're running. It meant something to Maxis at the time that they were changing the versions, but at the moment it means absolutely nothing. You then get the object ID of the thing that threw the error, 316, and the name of the object, which in this case is the sim Dina. Stack size is the number of frames, really belongs to the next section. And then this thing, stack number out of range, is the actual error that occurred. And these are the things that you kind of have to learn how to understand, decode what they mean. I've got a whole section on what these various errors mean, and we'll come back and look at that. At the moment, we're just looking at how the error log hangs together. What you then get is this thing stack. Stack is just like a stack of plates. It's a series of beehives that were called to get here, and as I said, it's in reverse. So the thing that threw the error was this beehive called interaction error parameter. I set it up and it occurred on line 1. In case you wanted to know where that had been called from, because sometimes the thing that generates the error is generating the error because you pass bad information to it, and the error is actually in the beehive that called it. The previous beehive that was executing was this thing called wait for notify, which is part of the main system, and that was called from function main check queue, and that was called from this thing called function main loop. And you've got the beehive number here. Irritatingly, they put it out in decimal, not hex, which would have been much more useful, because we all know beehives as 0x1004. We don't know them as 4096 or something. Or and we can follow this all the way down. And also at each level in this stack frame, it's telling you what was in the stack object ID 387. It assumes that that is an object, and it will tell you the name of the thing with that OID. Take some care with that, because when SIMs make phone calls, they're ringing up other SIMs, and you talk to a SIM by their neighborhood ID, their NID, and the thing that is in the stack object is not an object ID, it's a neighbor ID. So if this had been a phone call and we'd been talking to a SIM 387, who might have been, Darren, the error log is assuming that the thing in there is an object ID, and it has gone to look in the objects on the lot and decided that actually I was making a telephone call to this thing called accessory clipboard of tasks. I do have an error log for a phone call where one of the SIMs is talking to a flower pot. It's quite funny. Yeah. So that's just so that we can work our way back through the code, and this is our starting point. So that error, stack number out of a range, occurred in that beehive, which was called interaction error parameter, with that instance ID in decimal, be much more use in hex, and at line 0. So we could go and open the code up, look at that, and find out what it is. In our other sections, global simulator variables, if you've done any beehive programming, you know you can get to things like the current hour, the current minute, I forgot what else is in there, the lot number you're on, and that's what all these values are. And if you happen to know that the this whatever it is, that one, and that this error occurred at 6 o'clock in the morning, then it's great. But these are really hard to read as is. We're going to look at an easier way of reading this. If we've got some cheats on, they will show up in this other simulator details. And then we get a whole load of information about the my object. The my object is usually the sim that's generating the error. But if an error is thrown in function main or function init, then the my object is the object that is running the main and the init. So it's not always a sim, it's usually a sim, not always. Gives you the person name and some various other bits of information, general information. If it's a if it's a sim, it will give you all the person data for that sim. And again, it's just an index, which is a value. In here are their nice points, their interests in hobbies, their their current skill levels, their current bladder levels, but again, you have to know what all these numbers are and to be able to read out a value. So these things become incredibly difficult to read. And as you can see, there's a lot of person data, and then we get their motives, and then we are told that their slot 2, which is their right hand, she was holding something. Well, actually what she was holding was object 317, and I believe if we go back to the top, no, 387 is the accessory clipboard of tasks, so she was holding something else. Where are we? Okay. There's then a load more data for her, and you need to get things with names, find out her attribute values, semi-global attribute values, lots of information in here. What her arrays, Sims arrays are set up to, very advanced programming arrays. There's a set of temps here, and you will always look at the wrong set, and various other data tables. We then get into inventories, what's in the hood inventory, and these are all set up as GUIDs, and they're decimal. Again, we would really want them to be hex to be able to find anything meaningful, because that's an object GUID or a token GUID. Told Rachel there wouldn't be any maths, but as there is, if a hex number starts 0x8 or higher, it will show as an integer as a negative number. So again, converting these in and out of hex and trying to remember what property 3 on this token was. A lot of hard work. Lot inventory, family inventory, personal inventory, lots of data in here. And we end up scrolling through it, things, and because she's been around quite a long time, she's got quite a lot of information in her inventory. These are all memories and things. And then we get another huge set of almost identical data to go with the stack object. And the stack object will be the thing that she was interacting with that threw the error. So in this case, this clipboard of tasks thing. And we have all of its data, the attributes that it has, any semi-globals arrays. And then we have a series of temps, and these are the temps you're always going to be looking at under the object. Going to cover that in a minute. And then we get all of the objects on the lot. So we can see that we've got, she's got a set of bills on this lot, and they are object ID 174, and room -1 is their off-world, so she's obviously paid those. All of the job data for all of the possible jobs that teens and elders, there's lots of information on lots of objects on a lot that are all off-world. Anything in room 0 is outside generally, and then other room numbers, she's actually on a lot that's virtually just got a wall on it. You find it. And then finally it will tell you what your current cheats are set up. This is the contents of your user startup.ini plus all of the defaults that Axis has. Lots of information. So they are incredibly difficult to read. You end up scrolling up and down and searching for things and trying to work out what what is stack object 387, and you end up doing a search for a 387, and it's like, well, okay, there's one there. You find them all over the place. It's quite hard to read an error log, and I really recommend not doing it. So the summary of reading an error log is really a summary of gotchas of why you don't want to open a text file and read one. So usually the sim is interacting with an object when an error occurs. So my is the sim and SO will be the object interacted with. The sim data, my, is at the top of the log and is the stuff that you'll find first. However, the error is usually with the object they are interacting with, and those are at the bottom of the log. And so you need to scan over all of the sim ones to find the ones you're looking for. And quite often, and I've done it a lot, you'll be looking at an attribute going, that's not the right attribute value for that object. Why is it on value 8? It should have been on value 3. And you suddenly realize, oh God, I'm looking at the sims attributes, not the object attributes. And then when it comes to the temps, the code, I've got this the wrong way around on what I've told you previously, the code is running in the my object, so the temps you want are the ones at the top of the log, but because you scrolled to find the object, you're looking at the ones at the bottom of the log. So it's just really not set up to be helpful. Then another gotcha, I'm just going to mention it again, is the curse of nrefs. SimPE, when it clones objects, leaves this resource in the object called an nref. And it tries to set it to something helpful. So when I cloned this accessory clipboard of tasks, SimPE created myself an nref that said SimPE accessory notepad _cres. Yeah, that's really useful, because if that just pops up out of nowhere, you don't know which package file that is in. You know, it's accessory notepad to me is something that is a standard Maxis object, so I'm going to go wandering off into Maxis code and try and find out why a Maxis object went wrong. Whereas if you delete that nref, what it puts in that from is actually the name of the package, the name of the package file that code was in that threw the error. And that's really, really useful to know, especially when you start getting into a lot of custom object creators don't actually change their object names. You would not believe how many flamingos there are under sculpture that are actually stacks of washing, or you know, stacks of books, or a salt and pepper shaker or something. Because they were all cloned from Flamingo, the object names are all Flamingo, and they've all got this standard SimPE generated nref, and you have no idea where they came from. At least if you delete your nrefs, you will get the name of the package file that your error came from. So, reading an error log, it's a summary of the pain. You have endless scrolling. You are converting numbers from hex into decimal or decimal into hex. They put the instance numbers out as a decimal number, you need them as hex. You can do a lot of searching for numbers that you think are objects, and you're scrolling up and down to look in the lot object dump. You're having to count down the global list to find the 10th entry, to remember that that is the current family, and then you've got to remember that globals actually start counting from 0, so you want the 11th entry. You then end up wondering just what person data 17 equals 700 is. It's body skill, apparently. Searching attribute names sequentially, this is alright for an object that's only got 4 or 5 attributes, but when you start looking at some of the bigger Axis ones, they have 20, 30. Searching down for a name, and ideally want to be able to sort. You end up getting the wrong temp values again. What are all these inventory numbers? And when you're coding, inventory properties start counting from 1, but they actually display them in the log file as number 0. So there are lots of gotchas and sort of painful things going through trying to read an error log. So, because I'm a programmer, because I hate reading error logs, and because I hate making mistakes repetitively, I wrote this little application called Log Wathcer. And what we're going to do is we're going to open the same error log that I just had up in this program called Log Wathcer. Should have Log Wathcer on the screen. And with any luck, we're going to have our error logs. So I've got some error logs saved. They don't have to be under the errors subdirectory. And what I can do is I can just drag and drop an error log across into Log Wathcer, and it will open it for me. We'll look at some of the more advanced features once we've gone through Log Wathcer. So what it's done is it's read that log file and it's split it up into multiple sections. So at the highest level, it just told me that error, I generated that error on the 20th of June. It's just pulled the file date from it. I can then look at the header, and I can see that the error was stack number out of range. It's caused by Dina. I can look at just the frame. So here we go. I've got my interaction error parameter 1. If I hover over that 4165 decimal number, you can see it's generated a little tooltip of what it is in hex. So it's automatically convert whenever you hover over anything that looks like an integer, it converts it to hex for you. So if I hover over 387, it will convert it to 0x0183. Now, because 387 also occurs in the .object list, which it has read and parsed and kept a note of, it also knows that number 387 is accessory clipboard of tasks, which becomes incredibly useful when you start looking at parameters and locals that have been passed through. In that, that local, well, it's local 0 and it's got a number in 387. Well, it's actually storing reference to that accessory clipboard of tasks. So I don't have to do any of this searching. I can use the computer to look up all these numbers and convert them from decimal to hex for me. Yeah. So it makes reading the frame and what are in the contents of your parameters and your locals a heck of a lot easier to go through. When we come to look at the globals, excuse me, it's taken those values that were just equals a number, equals a number, equals a number, and it knows what they all are. So it knows that the first one was 70, was hour, day of months, zoom levels, and all this thing. But if I want something that I'm looking for specifically, I can just click on the column headings and it will sort by that. So if I was looking for free will, I don't have to keep running up and down this index going, where is it, where is it, oh, I've missed it, I've missed it, oh there it is. I can just sort that and scroll down and find it. If I'm looking for a specific value, I can sort by all the values, and if I click again, it will sort them in reverse order. Some of these are integers, some of them should be hex, so this current interaction GUID is part of a GUID, and actually you don't want to know that it's 3692, you just want the hex value again. You can sort by hex values and find things really quickly. So it makes reading what was in the contents of the globals a lot easier. There is a section for details which is just copied out. We then have the My object, and that expands down into the different sections, but we also have the stack object down here, also can expand down to the thing. So to flick between the two sets of temporaries, it's very quick. You can see which ones you're after. Sometimes you want the ones, rarely you want the ones in the stack object, most of the time. Again, with the person data, it's taken out all of those values by index and it's added all the names to them. So if you want to find the cleaning skill, the cooking skill, the charisma skill, the mechanical skill, And again, these all search, these all sort, so that it's easy to find the bits of information that you're looking at. Motive data, very similar. Again, just what's in the slots, but slot object contains object 317. Well, I can hover over it. Apparently that is the head slots holder. Slot 18 contains object 151, which is an to be greeted, apparently. Again, the object data, it knows what they all are, the graphics. If you're a BHAV program, you know most of these are, but again, very easy to find them. Very easy to look in the attributes, and if you're going, I'm looking in the wrong attributes, you can go and look in the stack objects attributes. Just flick between them. Again, semi-attributes, it's got the names. Arrays, it's just dumping information out of temps, the table. So it's very easy to switch between the two main blocks of the file, the my object and the stack object. Find the information you're looking for. I'm going to skip over in a moment. We can also look at the lot objects. You know, what are all these numbers? What are the objects? If I'm looking for a specific object on the lot, I can sort it, find out its ID, sort to find everything by what room they're in. If things are contained in things or contain things, you can find out what they are. So the plumb bob here is held in container 317, which is that head slots object, and the head slot holder is contained in Dina. So we can look at these things. Just by hovering over the number, it will give me the object name associated with that number. I don't have to go and go, right, okay, well it's in 316, right, I have to sort this, scroll down, find 316. Oh yeah, it's the Dina. What was I looking at? Because I forgot to take the number. You can just hover over to get this information. And again, the cheats, it just lists them out as a table, so you can sort. I've actually never ever looked in a log file for what the cheats were going to be set to. Inventory, it splits into the global, the lot, family, personal. If I look at an inventory, I no longer have these weird decimal numbers. It has converted everything for me into hex numbers. And it has a file that it knows, because it's gone and, well, it goes and looks through objects.package. It finds all the GUIDs and all the object names. So it's not a weird negative, positive in this case, decimal number. It's telling me that it's that GUID and it's a token dance experience. I still have to know what the count and the category under here are used for, but at least I know what they are. There's a memory grow up, potty trained, and it's got all the properties on here, both in hex, which is what you normally as, and as decimal. It also has an option up here, settings, add 1 to token property index. So instead of saying that property 0 is this, because when you write code it's actually property 1, it's automatically added to all the property numbers. When you're looking at properties 8 and 9, trying to work out why your code is, it's very useful to actually have the same numbers here as you have in BHAVs for looking at. We'll see if we can. So all the blue ones are standard Axis one. Expect some of the. That's not too bad. You can also add your own tokens in. So if you've created your own custom tokens, all of Marcus's skill training things, you can tell the system again that that is one of my GUIDs, that one that starts 0089, and I've told my system that it is that token, and it pulls them out in a different color. So the blue ones are the standard Maxis ones, the pinky ones are the standard, are your custom ones, and it throws out red ones in because it doesn't know what they are. It just makes them easy to. That 0089 is another one, so I could go up, pick it up and add it. But these 0086s are somebody else's. I suspect they're traits. So it does make looking through the inventory a lot. I'm going to just flick back to slide. So hopefully I've sold it to you. Don't read log files. Use Log Wathcer. Okay, so once you've started Log Wathcer, you can open multiple logs with it. So if I wanted to open multiple logs, I could just select multiple, drag it across, and it will open them all up in multiple tabs up here. So I can, if I've got two logs which are related to the same error, just generated by different sims or things, or you know, one occurred and then I made some changes and another one occurred, because you always use another bug when you fix one. You can use it to flick between multiple log files. So it will open multiple logs. You can select them, you can drag and drop them, but the other thing it will do is it will open log files automatically. It watches into the log directory, and when you start it up, any logs that you've got in there, it will automatically open if you've configured it. And again, as the game runs and it generates a log file, it will realize a log file has been created, and it will automatically open it if you have the settings. So you've got some settings here: open all logs at start, open recent logs, they're ones that have occurred in the last 7 days. You can automatically open new logs, and you can automatically update logs. So if a log file changes while the game is running, it will detect that change on the hard disk and reload the log file. So I'm lazy. Why keep asking it to open log files when I can? Its job is to read log files, so might as well have them open automatically. So as we've seen, slides here, it just tells you what it does. Reference. Next slide. In logs, deviating the pane, flicking between the two sets of temps, and then we can close logs as well. There are various ways of closing out the log files. We could, from the tab that's open, go File, Close Tab. It would work. Really wouldn't go from that. We could also have the setting so that if the log file is removed from the system, it will close it in Log Wathcer. Again, wouldn't recommend that, because sometimes your batch files can delete the log files when you start the game. You might actually still want it open to see what the last error was. And if you have that enabled, then it will close the log and you go, oh, my log's vanished. So the recommended way I would do is, if you click on the tab, you can close it. You have the option to close it and delete it. We can close all, and we can close and delete all. And note, if you close and delete, it actually puts them in the waste bin for you, so you can always go and get them back. And they've gone my folder here that I had the log. So closing the logs, I recommend you just do it by right-clicking on the tab. So the original question that was asked was, how do you read an error log? Well, that's how you read an error log. The real question, I suspect, that people wanted to ask when they said, how do you read an error log, was, what do they all mean? So this really comes down to interpreting an error log. What do all those geek speak error messages mean? Now, according to MTS, there are 161 possible errors. I have a link to them on the last slide. Good news, we will not be covering them all. Mainly because I don't know what they all are. We will cover the most frequently occurring ones. Ones that you hit most often are this stack number out of range. So, and every time I click on the slide, it goes to the next one. Stop clicking on the slide. So what is a stack number? Well, a stack number is either a parameter or a local. So you know we can pass parameters to a bhav. Go and watch the bhav ones, and bhavs can have local variables. And one of the things I said was most common is that you will say that there are 2 parameters. The arg count is 2, or the local var count is 4. And this actually gives you parameters 0 and 1 and locals 0 through 3. If you referenced parameter 2 or parameter 3, parameter 4, or local 5, or local 12, local 37, you would get a stack number out of it. So what you need to do is you need to go and look and find out which function it's in, which bhav it's in, which line number it's on. Go and look at what the local number or the parameter number that you used there. Compare it to the number that you've defined, either the argument count for parameters or the local var count for locals, and work out one of 2 things. Either you meant to use that local number and you forgot to increase the number in the top of the bhav section there, or you've typed the wrong number. You meant to use, local 3 and your finger accidentally slipped and hit local 5. So either you've used the wrong local in the code or you haven't got enough locals defined. If you've been a good person and you've created labels through, there's a advanced button down the bottom that says make labels, and you've got this TPRP thing enabled, and you've labeled your parameters and labeled your locals. When you come to look at them in the expression wizard, it will only show that there are labels for locals 0 and local 1. It won't allow you to select something for local 2, or if you have, then it will show up as either blank or it will just be local 2 in brackets. So another good reason for using labels, it makes mistakes easier to find. Related to stack number out of range, temporary reference out of range. There are only 8 temps, and called temp 0 through temp 7. If you try to use temp 8, you'll get a temporary reference out. As simple as that. Reference to stack object out of range. There is only one stack object, and it must be set to 0x000. So you can see here I've got local 0 equals stack object ID 2. This invariably happens because this used to read something like local 0 equals literal 2. You thought, I'll stick it in the stack object and I'll manipulate it. And you changed the literal to stack object and you forgot to change the 2 to a 0. It's almost always caused by a copy-paste kind of error, or forgetting to clear out your copied operands. When you insert a new line, it takes all the operands, and it's so easy to go local 0 equals stack object, local 0 equals local 0 plus 5, and not realise that you've got a stack object ID 2 there. Clicked on the slide again. And again, related to that is attribute number out of range. Attributes for an object are defined by the num attributes entry in the objd. You get 8 for free, 0 through 7, and if you need the 8th, you have to go and change that entry And it is so easy just to keep using attributes and label them up in the strings and forget to go and change the objjd. If you get an attribute number out of range, you've either used the wrong attribute number through a mistype, or you used it and wanted it, forgotten to increase that num attribute tree in the objjd. And there are some notes on that at that link. Next most common set of errors are those relating to beacons. And it's either that the beacon doesn't exist, so you've tried to reference beacon OX1003 and they only go up to OX1001. Or the line that you've asked for in the beacon doesn't exist, so you've asked it for line 9 and you've only defined 7 as you were writing code, and you're going, oh yeah, I'll move these hard-coded literals out into a beacon, and I'll use this one and do that one. And you do my favourite trick, which is then switch to the beacon and type the numbers in, and you go, damn, I forgot to commit the changes to the bhav. So you go back to the bhav and remake the changes and commit it, but you forgot to commit the beacon. So you now got the correct code in that's not referencing a beacon that exists. And that's my favourite way of generating that particular invalid constant error. Forgetting to commit the changes in the bhav and then forgetting to commit the changes in the beacon. If it's not caused by an idiot programmer during development, they're usually going to have been caused by a mod conflict. So you've got two mods that are affecting the same beacon. One has added more entries to the beacon and the other has changed some entries in the beacon. And depending which way round you load those two mods, you'll either have the extra entries but with the old values, or the new values but without the extra entries. And if you've got the latter case, when you run up the code that's looking for the beacon that it's expecting to have more entries, you'll get that invalid constant. So if you get one, it could be a error in the HCDU plus HCDU should have been able to detect, in that you've got two pieces of two mods updating the same beacon and you haven't solved the conflict. The other way it can work is because Maxis changed the contents of standard object beacons as the game progressed. If you're writing code for mansions and gardens and you're trying to get it to work with code created pre-pets, a lot of extra entries were added in when pets came out because they needed to deal with pets getting bored or pets doing autonomous actions, and a lot of standard Maxis beacons got extra code. If you've got an old custom object that you've downloaded from somewhere and it was created before pets or whatever, and you try and run it up with M&G or FreeTime, it will be looking for values that don't exist. That's the other common generating those errors. So the coding ones, the previous slide, out of range errors, these are usually quite easy to find. The beacon errors require slightly more Sherlock Holmesing around to actually work out why it occurred before actually trying to fix what's wrong. The next set of errors are what I've called transition errors. And you get these things called undefined transition. You usually panic. And all that means is that the true or false exit that was taken from the line specified pointed to an error condition. So this is my no-op where both of my exits, whether this returns true or false, they both go to error. Error is an undefined transition, and it just generates an error. This can either be intentionally, or the more common one is on this line above, local 1 equals this beacon constant. You've not put the colon equals, which is an assignment. You've put the equals sign, or the exclamation mark equals sign, which is a conditional test. So if local 1 doesn't equal that constant, it will return false, and that will go out on an error. And that will throw an undefined transition. So again, it can be, that's one of my favourite ones as I get more and more myopic in my old age, is that I pick the wrong operator and I don't get the colon equals, I get the equals one. Doing that. The other one is transition to mode that does not exist. In this case, my true should have gone to 1, and I double typed 1 and it's trying to go to 11. Line 11 doesn't exist, and you'll get that transition to mode that does not exist. bhav editor will helpfully tell you that this goes out to a question mark and that the line of code below it is unreachable. However, if you commit it, it won't say, by the way, you have unreachable code, or you have a transition that goes nowhere. Did you really mean this? Would have been quite useful to stick that little bit of logic in. Commit a bhav. It doesn't tell you. Assume you know what you're doing, even though it's a load of rubbish. And it goes on its merry sweet ways and commits your error halfway through the game, and it blows up at you. The other type of transition error is a bad go subtree error. And that's a call to a bhav that does not exist. So on this line, I've tried to call global 800, so 80A, and it's going, I don't know what you mean here, gov. Nothing is showing in the connections. The true to true all seems to be correct, and my falses might go somewhere. I've just typed in a completely wrong number. Now I have no idea what this number should be. It could be that I meant local 180A, or I meant semi-global 280A, or I meant global 808, which is the check for VP. But that's what these are. Usually caused by failing to download a required custom global mod, usually EP check. Recently, I created a set of notes for global bhavs, which we have recently updated, and if you follow that link, it will take you to a page where there is a link to our Google Docs spreadsheet, which is a list of all custom global. So it should give you an idea of what you forgot to download. Almost there. A few other errors that crop up from time to time. 3D object is not animatable. It's one of my personal favourites, because when I first came across it, I was like, what on earth does that mean? Even when you go and read the error message on MTS, it's like, what on earth does that mean? What it means is that you cloned a static object, a vase. You then tried to run an animation on it. You tried to kick it over, because you imported all of the Flamingo animations to try and kick it over. And it will go, this object is not animatable. Tried to animate it. And what you have to do to fix this one is you find the 3D object type in the OBJD, and you find that static objects, i.e. not animatable ones, have a 0 there. If you want to run animations on it, it has to have a 1. And we're almost done. There's a list of other resources. There's quite a lot of information about object errors. Some over at Sims2 tutorial. Midge the Tree has quite a lot on common TS2 errors on a couple of posts. And also my application, What's Caused This, would help you find where the error has occurred. Don't know what the time is at the moment, but that will take us into a lot of extra things. You've probably used it. It reads the error log. It attempts to find suspected packages that bhav was in. It's useful for finding, giving you a starting place to look, especially if somebody's left the nref pointing to simpe underscore accessory book underscore. So that's it, and we're just about on the hour. So what an error log is, what its text part consists of, how you read it in a text file, how you can read it with Log Wathcer and features of Log Wathcer, and then some of the more common error messages that you come across.